Hey everybody, welcome to 3 Things I've Learned with me, Susan Dolci, where we share the stories that shift our souls. So I don't know what's happening in your school districts, but here in Western Michigan, kids are going back to school next week. The only kid I have left in school is in college, and going back to college during a pandemic kind of comes with its own different set of hoops to jump through. But most of the middle schools and high schools in my area are going back to in-person teaching. And if I had kids going back to in-person teaching, I personally would be a wreck. Are all the kids going to wear masks? I don't know if they can make that mandatory. And another one for me is, what does lunch look like? Especially for younger, like elementary school kids, when they're so used to, swapping lunches and sharing and this whole thing. If I had a kid going back to in-person teaching, I would be a wreck. And add that I had a couple of kids who were rather anxious, and they were anxious kids, but a lot of anxiety just around school. And now if you're sending back a kid who suffers from anxiety and there's all these new protocols and guidelines, I'm grateful in a way that I don't have to deal with that personally, but that's why I've really been looking forward to my guest today. I was timing her to having her on a show that was right before school started, pardon me, because I think this topic is really, really important. Cheryl Blackington is a certified mindfulness instructor and the creator of teensjustbreathe.com, offering online mindfulness programs to youth and young adults. She brings 35 years of teaching experience in the public schools to her mindfulness teaching, as well as a wide breadth of training experiences, mindfulness teaching experiences, and personal mindfulness practice. She's affiliated with the Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness and offers a variety of classes and workshops on her website and through Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness. Cheryl, thank you so much for being on the show today. We've got a lot to talk about.
You're so welcome. I'm honored to be here, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to let everybody know before we dive into this conversation, which I'm anxious just thinking about this. Cheryl has been generous enough to give away one free youth mindfulness class to the first listener to call into that show. And that number is 1-800-930-2819. So if you call in, get the producer will take down your information and share that with Cheryl, and she'll get back to you. So let's talk about how parents and kids and teens and college kids are all sort of like suffering through this pandemic. Like, I can't imagine what your practice must look like right now. I would think there are a lot of people coming to you looking for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think what I'm seeing is what we're all seeing is we are all so stressed. We're just at the tip of the breaking point, and some of us have already gone over that a number of times, depending on your stage of life. If you are a parent right now and you are actively parenting and working and taking care of your kids, that is a huge stressor. If you don't have a job, that's a stressor. If you're getting ready to send back your kids to school, like you said, that is a huge stressor. So there's so much. I've really been writing and talking a lot about this, so much that we don't have control over right now. Everything's very, very uncertain. And that does not create us to feel like calm people when those circumstances are present. That, it just heightens our awareness and our reactivity to everything that's going on around us. And of course, it's not just the pandemic. There's a handful of other major issues that are happening at the same time. So we know that mindfulness was made for these times. We know that mindfulness is not a magic wand. It's not for everybody, but it certainly will bring in some really strong skills that you can fall back on when times are tough, like this. I liken it a lot to lifting weights. So we don't start lifting weights with 50 pounds, I'm probably still at a 5 or 10 pound weight, but you do, the same thing goes for mindfulness. You can't wait till you're in trauma mode to go, oh, I'm going to practice mindfulness now, because it really won't work. You haven't put in the time.
Mhm.
Mindfulness will change your brain. It reorganizes it. It helps lessen some of the reactivity pieces of our brain and strengthen the parts that will help us calm and maybe rebound more quickly into a state of more calm. That being said, I've been practicing for 9 years now, and I do feel my body is stressed. I feel that. I think we all feel that in the air. So, mindfulness will help us be more aware of what's happening and will help us, bring it to the parents or as an adult or as a kid, or as a youth, which are all the different ages that I work with.
Do you see this as, I mean, do you work with teachers a lot? I mean, are there ways, or are there teachers that are bringing this into the classroom?
There are. And I have a colleague, Patty Ward, who does a lot of work in that area. She works with mindful schools. So, those teachers who are out there who would really like to learn how to do this, I just told someone about that today again. Mindful Schools is an online program that will train teachers. We believe that you have to have your own practice first.
Mhm.
I know as a former teacher, I was the first to run out and grab stuff and make it my own and, recreate and, but we believe very strongly that you have to have your own practice, because I could talk about this as till I'm blue, but if I don't do it, I will not have any differences.
Mhm.
So Mindful Schools does hold that belief, and they do provide a training for you to become, like, understand how to do it yourself, and then move on to how to help others. I have worked with teachers in the past. In fact, I'm doing some professional development coming up this week soon. So, there's a variety of ways to go at it, but the best way and is always to seek out those who are experts or trained or certified in order to help you establish a practice, and then find out, well, how do I go about teaching this or working with kids?
Mhm.
And, the research has been going on for adults for, I bet, 40 years now, showing the positive health benefits, and so many benefits, emotional, mental, physical benefits. And with kids, it's probably about 15 years worth of research now. So we know that, in teachers' firsthand reports tell us that a great way to settle kids is to practice mindfulness and bring it into the classroom. When I was first starting out, mindfulness was seen as a threat. It was seen as a
Really?
way of, it was a religion. So I
Oh.
really want to stress that it's not a religion. You can have any religion you'd like. This is like a brain training. That's what you're
Mhm.
doing. You're developing skills. So yes, there are ways for them to reach out and find, and they can contact me as well, because as I said, I do that kind of work as well.
Yeah, uh, like I said, I had one of my youngest daughter tended to be very anxious when it came to school, and I would always tell her, so and she would have panic attacks, and I would always say, just stop, put your hand on your heart so you can feel your heart beating, take some deep breaths. The idea is that you need to get out of your mind, which is cycling out of control, and into your
Mhm.
body.
Mhm.
And I I mean, I was her mom, and she would be like, that's ridiculous. That's not going to help. Like, nothing's going to help. And it was so hard when they're in that full on panic attack to
Mhm.
get them to, calm down and start the process of letting the brain chemistry calm down and everything. And
Mhm.
it's so I applaud you teachers who can do this with kids, because I think it's an invaluable skill for them to take, not only just in high school and college, but their whole life.
Yeah,
I when we were
absolutely.
when we were prepping, I said, when we first went into lockdown, that presence was my refuge,
Mhm.
because I know, I do have a mindfulness practice, and if it weren't for the fact that I could tap into that, um, I think I would have just been in full down meltdown the first,
Mhm.
week or so.
Mhm.
And it's like, when you go on the airplane, they always say, put your mask on
Yeah.
first before, and that's the same thing you were saying with mindfulness. Like, you need to do it yourself before you can
Yeah. Absolutely. And you're making me think of so common. I get emails from parents, concerned parents, especially when they are in middle school and high school, saying, my child is so anxious, but they won't come to your class. They won't, try any of this. What do I do? And that's such, it's such a dilemma. But what I always say is, you go take the class, you learn how to practice mindfulness. It doesn't seem like it when they're in teenage years, but they still do model and listen to us, even if it's maybe not so much a verbal listening anymore, but they watch what you do and they
Hmm.
see how the changes occur in the parent. And I will say that after 1 month to 2 months, there are visible changes in how one behaves if you develop a daily mindfulness practice.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and as far as I don't know if we're going to talk about the anxiety piece later, which I can hold off on that if you'd like.
Yeah,
There's
I was
things
just
I
going
can
to say,
say.
yeah, this would probably be a really good time to take a quick break because I really do want to dive into the trauma brain chemistry aspect of it. And then absolutely like give us the tips, give us some practices that we can, so we can actually implement it. So we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Three Things I've Learned with Susan Dolci. We'll be right back. We're back on. This is Three Things I've Learned with Susan Dolci, and my guest today is certified mindfulness instructor Cheryl Blackington. And we're discussing how this pandemic is affecting kids and parents in this whole back to school scenario. But before we get started, two important housekeeping things. Cheryl is giving away a free youth mindfulness class. That's an online class to the first person who calls into the show. And that number is 1 800 930 2819. And Cheryl, where can people connect with you?
Right. Yes, they can go to teensjustbreathe.com. So direct registration can happen there, but they can also, if they're familiar with the Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness, as you mentioned, we're affiliates, so they can also find me there. They'll find the youth classes and then also the mindful parenting classes on that website. So Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness or Teens Just Breathe.
Yes, and you've got some coming up soon here. So,
Yes, I do.
yeah,
Hmm.
perfect timing.
Yeah.
Everybody needs mindfulness right now. So, before break, we were talking about the sort of like the chemistry of what's happening with anxiety when you're having an anxiety attack or panic
Hmm.
attack. And what I found fascinating was when you said that mindfulness practices actually rewire those, the rewires the brain. So, can you
Hmm.
talk some more about that? That's fascinating
Yeah.
to me.
Absolutely. So that term is called neuroplasticity, a big long word, which really means rewiring the brain. And scientists know that through the studies of putting active meditators into MRIs. And they do this series of testing where they can see what's going on in the brain. So what we know is that in our brain, when we whatever we do frequently, think of it as a highway or as a pathway, that highway or pathway will get larger and larger and larger. And then that turns into a habit. So if we have a positive, healthy habit, that's wonderful. That will be easier for us to accomplish. If we have a habit that isn't healthy, such as rumination or catastrophizing, which is what's going on right now with all of us in this anxiety state that we're in, that pathway will get larger. And it literally will not take much to ignite what I'm going to talk about next, which is the three major parts of the brain that really we work with in mindfulness. And I'm going to use some pretty simplistic terms, and I use it with all ages just because it's easiest for everyone to understand this way. And I'm going to borrow a hand signal from Dan Siegel, who's a researcher in mindfulness. So, our three parts of our brain, I'll start with, is our amygdala, which is my thumbnail here. And this is left over from our prehistoric days. It's the fight, flight, freeze mode of operation. It was designed to keep us safe. So whenever our body picked up signals of distress or danger, it would spring into action. Now, it's all good because that's how we evolved. But unfortunately, now it thinks extreme worrying is danger or, strong emotions is danger. So all of those things will cause the amygdala to take over essentially our brain. And all we are left then with is fight, flight, or freeze. And they say that adults are probably functioning at least 50% of our day in the amygdala, which is very frightening that we are not using our higher level thinking skills in order to solve the problems that we have coming across. And I think now the pandemic, probably we operate much higher in the amygdala and all the other things going on in our life. So, what we know and the power of mindfulness is that by breathing and establishing this mindfulness practice, we can slowly reintegrate our brain. And here is our prefrontal cortex, which is this forehead area of our brain. This is the CEO, the higher level problem solving. This is where we want to be as functioning adults. And we can be there when we are calm. So by practicing mindfulness, it brings about this reintegration and we're able to access different parts of our brain. I also go into with especially with kids and teachers whenever test anxiety is present, which is something I worked with a great deal with students that I worked with. There's also the hippocampus, the memory center of our brain. And whenever we call it flip our lid and the amygdala is activated, whenever that happens, we also really sever our ability to recover our memories.
Hmm.
So kids who have studied and practiced and they're ready for that test, but they've developed this anxiety over test taking, will flip their lids. Anxiety is taken over. Amygdala has taken over. They can't remember what they studied. And I think we've all had that, whether it's in the performing arts, what talking in front of people, all those things will trigger us. So by just simply doing some breath work, we can calm it. And I taught them this 5 finger method, and it's very effective to reintegrate, calm the amygdala. So the idea is the more we can do that practice, the easier it's going to be for us to calm. We understand what it feels like in our bodies. We understand what our emotions feel like in our body. We understand when we're overthinking and catastrophizing. All those things will cause our amygdala to spring into action. So by doing these simple practices, but it's the intention of being able to do it every day is what causes a lot of people difficulties. Like, oh, I've got to do this mindfulness practice.
So another thing we talked about too was how a child slash teenager slash young adult, their brain, their frontal cortex isn't fully developed until about age 25, right?
Right,
Which
right.
blows my mind because I mean, I remember being like 22 and thought I knew everything. So and so how does that make it harder for teaching young adults, youth, these practices? Is like, do you understand my question? Like, because
Yeah,
I would.
yeah, I do. So what I think you're getting at is that I think teachers and parents need to understand that our adult brain is not the same as our kids' brains. They're under construction. So 3-year-old kids are under extreme construction, and so are teenagers. And in our brain, what happens is our emotional center develops much faster than our prefrontal cortex. So when kids are between the ages of 13 and 25, the emotional capacities are usually fully developed by age 14.
Mhm.
But the part that involves the prefrontal cortex, the higher level thinking skill, the cause and effect, the analysis, all of those things is not finished wiring till the ages of about 25 to 29 years old. So that causes kids to just make these hasty, what we look as stupid decisions to do things because they really haven't got that ability yet to see the effect of what their behavior is going to ensue. So it's important to understand for teachers and parents to understand this fact. We'll come up with, well, what were they thinking? Why did they do that? It was like, oh, they really weren't.
Right.
They're really in this moment right now. So understanding that is really a nice way to have more patience and more compassion, especially for the teens that are in our lives.
Mhm. Do you find that they're open to these? Like, is it the parents signing them up? Is it the kids saying, "Hey, I want to learn more about this"? Because I think that I mean, I've come across some very cerebral, spiritual kids who would love to learn this stuff, and then I could also see parents going, "You know what? I do this. I want you to learn this," and then the kids are like, "What? This is
Yeah.
crazy, wacky. Yeah.
Yep, yep, yeah, absolutely. And I always tell parents, and I have worked with elementary, but because I'm not doing in person right now, I've stopped that until we can get back in person again. So, yeah, the teens that I've worked with, I've told parents, do not make them come. That is a lose-lose scenario. You can offer it to them, you can practice it, and I say that for adults too, and I can relate because when I first heard about it, it sounded stupid to me. I didn't want to do it. It's like just like your daughter was saying, what good is that going to do me? I don't get what my breath is going to do for me at all. So I most of the ones who come then, almost all of them want to be there, and it's usually because of anxiety or
Mm-hmm.
depression.
Mm-hmm.
Those two factors will often cause us to seek help when we can't find help anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just, like I said in the beginning, I feel that if this were a standard practice in schools, and I think, I think it's starting to spread. I think teachers are picking up on this. Uh,
Hmm.
that, I mean, this is a life skill. This is
Hmm.
this is just as important as learning how to swim, in my opinion.
Absolutely. It was life changing for me. And well, we haven't mentioned the self compassion piece of this, which I'd love to talk about at some point as well. This idea of self kindness,
Hmm.
especially the older the teens get, the more that they really, really need that.
Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the self-compassion piece, and then some practices, some methods that we can bring into our daily habits, good habits. You're listening to Three Things I've Learned. I'm Susan Dolci. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Three Things I've Learned with Susan Dolci. We're talking with Cheryl Blackington today about mindfulness practices and self-compassion. But I just want to let Gloria, who called in, know that Gloria won the free youth mindfulness class, and Cheryl will be reaching out to you soon. So also, one more time, Cheryl, if you can let people know where they can find you so they can take advantage of some of these workshops that you have online.
Right. You can go to Teens Just Breathe. That's three. Well, it's three words, but online it's teensjustbreathe.com. That is my website, and my affiliate is the Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness. So whichever is easiest for you to remember, you can find me in both places.
Great. Thank you. So we were talking about what actually happens with the brain, and we were going to talk a little bit more about self-compassion. What can you
Mhm.
share with about self-compassion, which so many people, I mean, I think it's misunderstood.
It is. And it is one of those pieces right now that would so help all of us. It is probably what I practice more than anything right now. So, how I liken it is mindfulness is the skill to develop our awareness of what is already present in our lives. So, to identify what we're feeling, or identify what we're thinking, or identify if we're overthinking or worrying, identify the physical sensations in our body. So, mindfulness allows us to develop those skills to notice what we normally don't notice. Before I started, I used to call myself a talking head, where I was just running around totally disconnected from the rest of me. And I think most of us probably go around like that. So, mindfulness helps us bring that awareness with kindness and patience. And then the self compassion piece is, well, what can we do about what we're struggling with? What can we do with this pandemic right now? What possibly is there that we can do? So we take a stock of what our needs are, what we're feeling, and then what we need. So we might need, for instance, some food or a break or a rest or some exercise. Those are just our basic human needs, or social connection. We might need that. So self compassion gives us some of the practices for how I look at it as how we would treat our best friend, or how we would treat someone that we really loved. Do we treat ourselves the same way? And most of us beat ourselves up relentlessly all day long. We're not measuring
Mhm.
up. We're not as good as this person. We'll never be able to do that. Oh, we're a failure. All of these inner critic thoughts that go running through our head all the time. Self compassion helps us address that and treat ourselves in a kinder way. So we have a variety of different practices that help us get there. But I guess maybe a really easy one to remember is first we bring to awareness what we're struggling with and just name it, such as anger is here, frustration is here, sadness is here. So we name that, whatever the feeling is that's happening in us. And then we remember that we are not alone. In fact, with this pandemic, we can clearly see we are all so interconnected with one another. We are all so connected. Everybody is struggling. We are certainly not the only ones in this case. And when I work with teens, they tend to think they are the only ones, like they're all alone. If anybody else knew what was wrong with them, then, and actually everybody has trouble.
Mhm.
At any given time, you're going to see thousands or millions of people struggling. And then the last piece again is what can you do? How can you take care of yourself? It might be what just a soothing touch, we call it, where you just simply place your hands on your heart or on your belly, or you take a nice breath and close your eyes and just take a breath in a minute. Pause for 1 minute will make a world of difference. So, yeah, self compassion is just taking stock of how we can care for ourselves. And if it's not immediate, maybe it's that evening or maybe the weekend you can look forward to. Okay, here I get to do this. This is something I can hang my hat on and I know I can do. At some point, we're giving ourselves that message of self care and that we're important.
Mhm. And being a life coach, it never ceases to amaze me that people forget that feelings are for feeling. Feelings aren't for stuffing down or, putting in a box or pretending away. Feelings are there to feel, and they come with a lesson, and they come with information for you to pay attention to something that's happening in your body or in your life. And
Mhm.
so yeah, and so that's why I mean, so many of my clients struggle with actually naming the feeling.
Yes. I have done that too. In fact, I have to bring my little dolls in. When I work with kids, I bring in some of these inside out dolls just to help
So
them really
cute.
identify with what, some of these feelings feel like. And they're also really
Yeah.
cute and they make you laugh. But I also will have charts out, just very even with like you say adults, it's really hard for us to go beyond the mad, sad, glad. I mean, that's really hard. And it's also really hard to name an uncomfortable feeling like anger or
Mhm.
frustration or fear. Those are so difficult. I really struggle with that myself. And what we want to do is turn away from it, run away from it, hide from it, stuff it down, pretend it's not there. And of course, we all know it doesn't help it at all. It's still there and it will even get larger the more we ignore it.
What we resist persists, right?
Absolutely. Feel it to
So
heal
yeah.
it.
Oh, I love that one. Oh, I have to write that one down. That's great. I was talking with my trainer the other day, and she mentioned because so we meet outside. We used to meet at the gym. Now we meet out in a park. That's the only way we can do that here.
Yeah.
And but she was talking about how attaching um, a good habit, like if you want to start a new habit, attach it to a good habit you already have. And so her example was, so you're brushing your teeth in the morning, either while you're brushing your teeth or right after, do 15 squats, which
Hmm.
I hate squats. So I at least I would I would attempt maybe 10. I don't know, but yeah. So I think that trying to find other ways to
Hmm.
actually make it a good habit, because
Hmm.
that's a struggle in and of
Yeah.
itself.
It really is a struggle. I think set that intention like you're talking about. And we could actually piggyback onto your example because we use something called mindful moments where you do something that you already do a lot of. Now, maybe it's brushing your teeth or doing those squats or washing your hands, or washing your hair, but rather than just go, and now I'm done. And meanwhile, I've been multitasking and thinking about 1,000 different things. So I'm not even really sure if I did wash my hands or if I did put soap there or how long it occurred. So mindful moments means that you literally bring your attention on the act of washing your hands, feeling the sensations, feeling the temperature, feeling maybe the softness and the soapiness of the whole thing. And while you're doing that, you just breathe. And
Mm,
maybe you do that for a minute. And it's a good way to get started. We all have to wash our hands a lot these days. And so by doing it mindfully, you're already starting to plant those seeds and give yourself this really needed break, compassionate break of taking care of yourself.
Is there a practice that you could recommend that works well with kids? Or
Yes. This, I think, is popular with kids and adults, and I'll demonstrate it. It's called five-finger breathing. And there's a number of little tricks, or things like this, but this is the one I'll share with you. So basically, when I teach them, and this, I've really connected with the test anxiety piece, something they need immediate relief from. So what they do is they mindfully trace their finger while they breathe. So they would, for instance, go, they would breathe in and breathe out. And while they're breathing in and out, they trace their finger, but they also notice all of the sensations that are involved with the physical contact
mm,
of feeling their finger as they breathe. They do it slowly and intentionally. And usually we go through 2 rounds of this. And usually that's enough to reintegrate the brain and calm the amygdala and bring you back, being able to move back into whatever it is you were trying to do. That's really popular. And I didn't bring it with me, but a Hoberman sphere, which is those expandable circle things.
oh, yeah, those are cool.
So
Yeah.
it's a really nice focal point where they might breathe in and then breathe out. There's also, like butterfly arms of breathing in and breathing out. And that's actually been researched to work with trauma as well, to get that physical movement with the breath and even some humming attached to that. All those things are really, really good to address trauma, anxiety, and bring out calm more quickly, probably, than others that you could
Mhm.
do.
One of my teachers said that when you have a strong release of emotion, whether you're screaming or crying or like whatever, if there's a very cathartic release of emotion, that it's equally as important after that to move and to kind of like get it out of your cellular
Mm-hmm.
system. And so that's why what you're saying to me makes so much sense, because there's that physical component is what helps us get out of our heads and back
Mm-hmm.
into our bodies, because we're just like you said, I was a talking head for several years. You just you're like you're so disconnected from what's happening in our body. And I mean, isn't that, I'm digressing, but that's the cause of so much disease too. And our bodies are screaming for us to pay attention to them, and we're just still stuck in the fear
So,
cycle.
so much so. And that's why when we take a formal mindfulness class, we train with our senses. So we'll do mindful eating, mindful walking, mindful listening, mindful seeing. And people are always amazed at what they discover because we just don't pay attention in that way in our normal life.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you also, if I real quick, I will say that whole movement piece of releasing really that strong emotion also releases the trauma, and they suggest shaking. And
Mm,
if you think about this, dogs will get up and they'll shake from head to tail. They're really shaking all that energy out and getting ready to move on. So shaking is a good one to do too.
yeah, it always amazes me that like when that adding that physical component, whether it's going for a run or, punching a bag or a pillow or dancing, just there, it's like it's like it's in your cellular system. It's like in your body, and it needs to be flushed out. So yeah, it fascinates me. Okay, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come
Okay.
back, we're going to talk about a little bit more about some methods we can use. And of course, we have to hear Cheryl's 3 things. So we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Today, we've been talking about how to bring more mindfulness and presence into our lives to help cope during these crazy, uncertain times. And my guest today is Cheryl Blackington. She is the creator of teensjustbreathe.com. If you want to find out or want more information on her online classes, she's got a couple coming up for different age groups. I also personally took her mindful parenting workshop, which I was blown away. It was great. I kind of thought I knew a lot about mindfulness, and I learned more. So I just highly recommend Cheryl's workshops.
Yes.
So we were talking about self compassion and mindfulness practices. And one of the things that you wrote in an article recently was about setting up a schedule for your family, like how to create a compassionate weekly schedule for your family. And I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes it's the simplest things that we forget about when things get out of whack for us, and I include myself in this too. If I've had a troubling week, maybe I forgot to get my exercise in. That's really big for me. Or maybe I wasn't eating well, or I wasn't socializing. Those are some of the examples. But as far as families go, we know right now that it's difficult. There is, no matter whether you are at homeschooling or you are at school or you're hybrid, whatever it is, it's less than good.
Mhm,
So people are very, very stressed about that. So what we can do is we can notice that this is really difficult. This is really hard and I don't like it, but that's the way it is. So sometimes when we continue to fight with, there's something we can't do anything about, is when we start creating more suffering for ourselves. So noting that it's difficult, maybe we have to say that 20 times a day. This is hard. This is really hard. Oh, this is hard. So we name it. What is
mhm,
that? That's difficult for us. And then when we're feeling calm, figure out what is needed to make your week just be workable or goodish or good enough. I think we all need to let go of all these fantastic, homemade lunches that we have all prepared for our kids, and everything they have to do. I think we need to delegate to our family members, and we have to just accept the fact that it's probably not great right now, but we're doing the best we can. And that being said, there are things you can build into your day or practices throughout the day, like the mindful moments, just setting your watch or your phone to every hour, every 2 hours, you're going to take a breath break. You're just going to pause and breathe for 1 minute. It's amazing what that can do for you. But you get your exercise in. If there's a homework time, find a way. The older the kids are, the more you have to build them into it. One of the things that I talk about a lot in mindful parenting is creating transitions,
mhm,
that the times that are going to be the most difficult for your child, whether it be getting to their homework or quitting their computer game, whatever those high stress moments are, see if there's a way that you can find to transition in and out of those. And one I always talk about is join their world, come and sit with them,
mm,
be with them, just observe them, just sit there and join their world, and they're more likely to join yours and what you want them to do. But take it easy, let go of a lot of the high lofty goals that you have. Take it a minute at a time if you need to, and just know this is hard. Everybody else is having a rough time. Reach
mhm.
out for social support when you can. And I came across in a trauma training that I did something that I think is so valuable. I'm going to mention it right now. um, so this would happen at the end of a day, maybe with an ally that you could find that you could talk with. And this is meant to be short and quick. So the first step is, what bothered you today? What did you struggle with today? What disturbed you today? And it's not meant to for the other person to launch into, well, he said and she said and blah. It's not that. It's a simple, it was difficult. It was a struggle. That test was hard. Whatever, just name it very shortly in a sentence. And then move on to, how strongly is this impacting you on a scale of 1 to 5? Just how hard is this? So rate it. And then move into, what do you need? And as I mentioned earlier, maybe you need a little break. Maybe you need to
Mm.
eat. Maybe you need to walk. So the three steps again are, what really bothered you the most today? What did you really struggle with? How did it impact you? And at what level? And then what do you need? And it's meant to do that whole mindfulness theory where you name it to tame it, you feel it to heal it, and then you take care of yourself and you let it go. So yeah, those are a few things that people can do, and I think the biggest thing is accepting this is really hard, and wherever you can find support, find it.
Well, yeah, and especially for, here I started this with feeling anxious for people who had to send their kids back. And
Mhm.
there's just as much on the other side, anxiety over um online school and having to, be the teacher, create a situation, set up a place for your child
Mhm.
to be able to successfully learn online, which is a whole different that's a whole different show.
Mhm.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think that's great advice. Like I said, if you are in the Grand Rapids area, I would highly recommend you take advantage of Cheryl's in-person classes when they come back in person, which hopefully is not going to be 2021. I mean, like 2022. Hopefully, sometime next year, because and she's if you haven't picked up, she's such a soothing soul and such a soothing personality. I'm sure you could make any kid um, calm by just being you. So, name of the
Thank
show
you.
is Three Things I've Learned. So, what are the three things you've learned about mindfulness and self compassion?
Okay, well, the very first one is judgment. And when I first started, I was blown away how much I judge everybody, everything, myself, just nothing but a capital J for all of that. And right now, we're really busy judging everybody else on how they're doing the pandemic and how,
Mm,
how they're doing it. So I would strongly recommend the practice of when you notice you're judging. It's not helpful at all for anybody to let it go and maybe replace it with being curious. Well, I wonder why, or I wonder what's
mm,
causing, those kinds of things, and really bring it with curiosity and kindness. So that's my number one, big one, judgment. The second one is whenever you can, take a breath, take a pause, slow it down, and just relish that moment of nothingness. And
mm.
then I would also highly recommend a practice of some sort. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's sitting meditation, there's walking. Those are probably two of the most popular, but there's listening and seeing and eating. There's all kinds of apps out there. On my website, I do have some guided meditations there that people could access just to check it out and see if it's for them. But there are so many ways that you can investigate this now that I would encourage you, if one doesn't fit for you, try another one.
Absolutely. Very, very wise words indeed. It really is a game changer, especially if, like I said, if you have kids who are anxious or you're personally anxious.
Right.
Mindfulness is the medicine. Mindfulness is the medicine. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for being on the show today. This has been
Thank you.
awesome. Again, you can find her at teensjustbreathe.com. And she's got several different classes that are coming up really like in the next couple weeks. So definitely head
Right.
over there if you're interested in that. Thanks for listening to Three Things I've Learned with Susan Dolci. For more information on how to mentor with me, you can go to my website at susandolci.com. You can sign up there for a free 30-minute clarity call. You can also sign up for my newsletter, which features, you get a preview of who's going to be on the show and what we're going to talk about, which is why I'm putting in a cliffhanger for the first time. On my next show on September 1st, I'm interviewing Karen Tibbles as we discuss her new book, Persuade, Don't Preach, Restoring Civility Across the Political Divide. If you're looking for ways to have a productive conversation about politics, and that keyword is productive, you won't want to miss the show. And again, I was super excited that I could get her on prior to Election Day because we're all like, on the back of her book, it's like, are you tired of fighting with your uncle over, politics? Are you avoiding your neighbors and your friends because you don't want to have those conversations? So I'm really, really looking forward to Karen's interview, and I'm sure I've read the book. She definitely has a plan. So, and it's going to be great. It's going to be a great show. So we all have a story to tell. We can live in the story or we can transform the story. And that's your choice. Change your story, change our world. Hashtag Storyfield. Thanks for listening, everyone.